Hello again, this is Adrian Madril with Channel 5. The show today, Peace of Mind, is over the topic of water and proper hydration. Very important this time of year when we are going to get into temperatures that are, well over 100 degrees. Even temperatures like today, 80s and 90 degrees, is still important that you stay hydrated. And so today on our show, we have a wonderful guest with us, Dr. Amy Madril, and she is a family physician with the Ashley Clinic here in Chanute, Kansas. And so thank you, Dr. Madril, for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me.
It was our pleasure. To get the formalities out of the way, for those who don't know, Dr. Madril is my wife, so probably need some sort of disclaimer there, but I will still refer to her in the proper Dr. Madril terminology because, well, she is a professional. Well, you know what? Dr. Viatti was on my show the other day, and he said, call me Bill. So if you prefer Amy, I'll call you Amy.
Amy would be great.
Amy would be great. Okay. So Amy's on our show today to talk about proper hydration, and we're going to get into some of the side issues with the importance of water as well. So thank you for being on our show, and just to let people know a little bit about you. You're Dr. Amy Madril, but your doctor has a couple extra initials after it. If you look at the board of doctors' names when they walk into Ashley Clinic, you have an MD and a PhD.
Yes.
Okay. And so for those of my audience like me before I married you, explain to us the difference in a Dr. MD and a Dr. PhD.
The MD, the medical doctor, it's a 4-year degree after undergraduate plus specialized training during residency, and its purpose is to train a person to be able to take care of a person's health needs, and training in the physiology or how our body normally works, the pathology or what can go wrong. It also teaches about interventions and things we can do to help people be healthy, such as lifestyle changes and medications and things along those lines. So that's basically your MD, medical doctor. The PhD is a whole different world. It is, there are lots of different types of PhDs. The PhD I have is in biochemistry, and so the PhD in biochemistry involves a lot of classwork and then research on whatever your subject matter of interest is. Mine was on DNA repair, and so I spent several years studying and learning and doing research on mechanisms of DNA repair in the body. And so the PhD was the outcome of that, and the training is to allow a person to have the knowledge and expertise to advance medical science.
So in the biology side of things, that PhD teaches a person to think differently than a person with an MD. So
Somewhat, yes.
So you have actually an ability to look at things from maybe two different perspectives, which probably ties into our talk with the importance of water today, because water is so very important on that biological level. And without getting into all the fancy cellular interactions and upregulation, downregulation, and fancy terms I don't even know what I'm talking about, that water plays an important role on that biochemical level.
Absolutely. Every single biochemical interaction in the body almost is mediated by water. And so if you don't have appropriate water intake, your cells don't work right. Your metabolism isn't right, your thinking isn't right, your body doesn't work at maximal performance. It's vital.
And some theories are that when you're dehydrated, if you have pain symptoms associated with a medical condition, that those pain symptoms could be increased.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of different areas, and a lot of people don't think about that when they go through their day. So, so we're talking about hydration, And why is it important to stay hydrated? You kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
But for those of us who go, okay, all that fancy mumbo jumbo that you learned in school, what's it mean to me?
Yeah.
I know for me, when I started drinking more water, especially before I go to bed and first thing in the morning, my head seems to be clearer. And beforehand, you were talking about some numbers about yeah, a certain amount of dehydration affects a certain performance level.
Very true. Um, Adequate hydration is necessary in order to have all of our bodily functions. In fact, our brain doesn't think as well without good water intake. Our brain is about, I believe it was 80% water, and our muscles and such don't work as well without adequate water. Our body can't regulate its own temperature without adequate water. And again, as we mentioned earlier, the cells don't do the things that the cells are supposed to do most efficiently without enough water. And then there's things like our kidneys will fail without water. So,
So when people get into dehydrated states, they're actually affecting their kidneys.
absolutely.
And what are some of the symptoms of dehydration?
There's lots of different symptoms of dehydration, and actually, as a person ages, their symptoms may be more or less pronounced. Um, so general symptoms of dehydration would be not thinking clearly, being extra tired. Um, you can have dry mouth, you can have increased thirst, you can have decreased urination or more concentrated urination, which would be more yellow or dark yellow. You can have some other signs going on like faster heartbeat. You can have your blood pressure drop when you go from a laying position to a standing position. That can make you dizzy or lightheaded. Your skin will look a lot older because you won't have the same bounce back capability of the skin after being pinched. They call that decreased turgor of your skin. Lots of different things.
Well, and I know with my dad, when he gets dehydrated, you can see it in his face, and like the wrinkles, the lines in the face seem to become more pronounced.
Yes.
And so, not just for you, but for your family members, you see them working out in the heat and stuff. Maybe take note of little symptoms, little signs that look a little off, and just encourage family members to take a break and have a little bit of water. Now,
Speaking of which.
yeah, speaking of which, getting a little dry mouth myself. We were talking before the show about just in our respiration, we lose water out of our body as well. I think you mentioned something about like a 1 to 2 cups a day of water.
Yes.
When we want to stay hydrated, is there a better way to stay hydrated? Certain things that we eat or drink, or maybe some people drink all day. Some people, like this one glass will take them all day to drink. Others will gulp it down. Is there a way that's generally better?
To drink it slowly or drink it in
Big gulps,
volumes?
or one glass a day, or
Ah.
any? It's kind of an open question to run with it anywhere you want to go.
Run with it. Okay. So, how much water should we have, and how should we get it in? Are there ways other than water to get adequate hydration? Basically, the old thought was 6 to 8 8-ounce glasses of water a day. And that is being replaced by something that's a little bit more logical, because a 98-pound, 70-year-old lady probably doesn't need the same amount of water as a 22-year-old, 220-pound male, And so what they're doing now is they're going off of how much a person weighs and to dictate how much their water requirements are per day. And the general gist on that now is you take your body weight, however many pounds that is, and you cut that number in half. That's the number of ounces of water that a person needs to drink every single day.
So half your body weight in fluid ounces of water.
Yes.
Okay. That's very similar to what I talk to my clients about when they come in and want to lose weight. And so water can be helpful in people losing weight.
Yes, it definitely can. For one thing, it makes your metabolism much more efficient on the cellular level, and it also takes up space. And so, and then there's also another aspect of it. But with regard to the taking up space, if you drink a glass of water before each meal, you have a glass of water less volume of space in your stomach to take up with food. And the aspect that I was alluding to earlier is that if a person has hunger in the middle of the day, then that our body's kind of strange in that it can misinterpret thirst as hunger. And so folks tend to, oh, I'm hungry, let me find something to snack on. And how often is that something, nutritious, actually has a nutrient value to fuel our bodies? How often is that?
And a lot of times what we find as that snack is actually counterproductive to quenching that thirst. We usually get some sort of salty
pretzels
chip or pretzels.
Chips.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so
if you have a glass of water, that oftentimes takes care of the hunger.
So there's a lot of times I get people telling me, well, I drink plenty of water. I drink, 4 cups of coffee during the day, and I drink soda or I drink tea, and they have water in them. And what is your idea, or what is the thought on that?
The kind of depends on what the drink is that a person is talking about. If it's not pure water, then it has extra things in it. Obviously, there's like milk has proteins and some carbohydrates and simple sugars and fat and things along those lines. So it kind of depends on the balance of the nutrients versus not being pure water. So low-fat milk's probably a great thing. Now, do you want to drink half your body weight in fluid ounces of milk a day? Probably not. You need to be, in moderation.
It's only low fat if it's in moderation.
Right. And so there's milk. There's fruit juice that people say, oh, it's really healthy. I'm drinking fruit juice. Well, fruit juice may or may not have the nutrients that the fruit does. Depends on how it's processed and all this kind of thing. So
definitely doesn't have the fiber.
Exactly, and so it doesn't have the fiber, and it may or may not have the nutrients. And fruit is God's dessert, nature's dessert. And so, if we're having dessert for a snack and dessert with our meals and dessert, it's a little overdone on that. Again, moderation. But then when you get to the caffeinated and beverages like coffee and tea, even if it's unsugared, the caffeine will end up making you urinate more. It's a diuretic, and so that's counterproductive. And so people don't want to be drinking a bunch of tea or a bunch of coffee or energy drinks. That's a whole other matter. But and then finally is the sodas, and sodas are unfortunately very popular and very bad for you. They've got empty calories of the sugar that's in a liquid form. Your body doesn't even have to do anything in order to absorb it and turn it into fat. And also it's got your phosphorus in it, and in basically every caffeinated beverage of your sodas, and that'll leach the calcium out of your bones. But I digress anyway.
Well, I'm going to progress there with the soapbox because when we're talking about as people get older, we make certain choices. We get into routines, we get into ruts and habits and whatnot. And so I've seen it in my family where you start off when we were younger, it was okay to have an occasional soda pop when when you went out for a meal, and we didn't go out for meals all the time. It may have been once every 2 weeks or something.
Right.
But then at some point, I'd seen it transition to my family where the beverage of choice, that staple, was
Soda pop.
Pepsi or Coca-Cola, and that it became a replacement for everything else.
Right.
And a comment I wanted to make on the fruit juices also applies to the soda beverages. Is we had a health fair recently, and we had some dental technicians coming in and talking about your beverage choices. And not only they had a nice little display. It had, like, if you're drinking this is the amount of sugar that you're drinking, but also the amount of acid that you're
right.
consuming,
Yeah.
and that eats away at the enamel of your teeth. And so when we make these beverage choices, we're finding that we're damaging all aspects of our body.
Right.
And you'll see me out in town and I'll have an occasional soda. You'll see me out in town and I'll have an occasional beer. But it's an occasional thing. We need to learn to practice moderation. But one thing we don't necessarily want to moderate is cool, crisp, clean, refreshing water. And think about a hot summer's day. Think about maybe some of you wrestlers out there. I was a high school wrestler too. You go out and you're on that mat practicing. You finally get that break and you go and you have a sip of water. How cool and how refreshing that is. How wonderful it is just for that sip of water. So we can keep that mindset, and during the day, you know what? Cool, crisp, clean, refreshing water. Now,
Absolutely.
I constantly hear from naysayers that, well, you can have too much water. Yeah. And I think there is a medical condition that they're referencing, maybe misreferencing, I don't know. Can you explain that a little further?
What they're referring to is water intoxication, and that is, it's interesting because that's not necessarily the amount of water that you take, but kind of the, our kidneys can filter up to 15 liters of water every day.
15 liters?
15 liters of water.
That's amazing.
And so it was at about 15 quarts. Anyway, because I think a quart's about a liter. So about 15 liters of water every day can be filtered by our kidneys and handled by healthy kidneys, granted. So it would take an awful lot for our bodies to truly be overloaded with water. It can happen, and it tends to happen more when people drink a very large volume of water within like an hour time frame. So, spread your water out over the day. You don't, unless you have a cardiac condition or a renal condition, so a heart condition or a kidney condition, in which case you need to ask your doctor about that to figure out if you need to have a different water intake than everybody else. But assuming you don't have that, you can drink as much water as you want, spread out over the day,
I think the important thing is to breathe between swallows.
Exactly.
If you just get dunked in the pool and you don't breathe, that's when water's bad for you.
That's right.
But bottled water, tap water. Now, some people live with rural water, and you hear stories of it smelling like sulfur or tasting like rust or something. But then you also hear stories about some bottled water is so purified that there's not vital elements from natural filtration that's in it.
Exactly. Your trace elements that are necessary also for our body's functions. We think of water as just H2O, but water is dihydrogen oxide. Anyway, it has a lot of trace elements in there that are necessary. And so, in general, probably tap water is a better way to go, but in certain areas of the country and such, there is not adequate filtration to take any sort of unpleasant aroma or whatever out of the water. And so, it's up to a personal taste on that. I would um, basically say that the water industry, the bottled water industry has quite the thing going and making people think that they have to have bottled water to be healthy. No.
Well, it's
You don't.
it's great marketing,
This-
and
yeah.
and there are some advantages to bottled water, but there's also some
Portability.
disadvantages that we need to be aware of as being, you know, um, sound use of our environment, or you know, this
Absolutely.
earth that we live on. We can only put so many
Absolutely.
plastic bottles into the landfill. So there are different things that one can do if you use plastic bottles, and you can refill the plastic bottles with, you know, that water from your refrigerator, or water from your, you know, Brita filter, or your tap water, and so and that keeps the cost down of bottled water. So, but yeah, the convenience of the carryability and to put a top on it. Side note, really not water, but tea. So somebody wants to get some water in, but wants a little bit of flavor. There are certain teas, because we talked about caffeinated beverages being a diuretic.
Yeah.
Some teas are better than others from the perspective of water
Well,
and hydration.
potentially your herbal teas, you know, the truly non-tea leaf teas, you know, chamomile and things along those lines. They could potentially be a way that a person could get water in when they don't, or when they feel that they have to have some sort of a flavor in their beverage. Um, Other things that you can do though, to spice up your water, if you will, is just add a slice of lemon, or a slice of lime, or an orange, you know, orange slice.
Maybe a mint leaf.
Maybe a mint leaf, yeah.
Just practice and experiment with things in your kitchen. Just don't go under the kitchen sink for the things you want to experiment with. Those are probably not good for you.
You do have the number for poison control.
Poison control, very good. Okay, well, that's pretty close to the end of our time today. I've got a couple of minutes left over. Is there anything about this topic, or about, you know, the weight management, or any other topic that that you want to share? Maybe anything going on different within your practice that you want to talk about, or anything that we should be looking forward to?
I was going to give you a hard time and say no.
No? Well, okay. So, I heard you're also doing a little extra educational study,
Yes.
getting a fellowship.
Yes.
And I know it's quite a complicated subject. We could probably have you back on the show just to talk about
2 or 3 times.
But as you're doing your fellowship, you're doing a few little things with some of your patients, and going into that biochemical level that.
Yeah. So basically that fellowship is it's called a fellowship in functional medicine, and it's going to be board certification in it, and I'm kind of probably about a third of my way through the training right now, and it deals with getting to the root of the problem. There are numerous reasons why this has happened, but it seems like standard medicine has gone away from getting to the root of why a person has an issue going on, and is more, okay, you've got diabetes. Well, there's diet, there's exercise, and there's medicines, and so, but we don't look at, well, what's going on that's making the person have diabetes, other than eating jelly donuts and sodas all the time or something, you know. Because that's not the case with a lot of folks. They're not having those issues. So anyway, this fellowship kind of delves into more the biochemistry on what's going on, and getting back to a lot of the things that actually we did learn in medical school, but it just kind of, everything else overtook it. In the importance of trying to get things under control. It's kind of a strange, dichotomy of what medicine, we've got so much advancement in medicine, and yet there's this whole problem of why is this happening and how can we prevent it in family members and all of this. So it's a lot of dredging into the trenches of biochemistry to figure out what might be going on for an individual. And I lost the train of topic after that.
That's okay. I think you pretty much kind of covered
Okay.
the topic. Just so that people don't go, oh, this is something new and different, let me go beat down your doors.
Yes.
There is a drawback to some of these tests that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that is?
Basically, these tests that we're talking about that can help us figure out a little bit about what's underlying a lot of these illnesses, anything from thyroid issues to hormones to diabetes to hypertension to cholesterol, any number of things like this. A lot of the testing that this fellowship is training us on, the insurance companies have not caught up with the times and the advancements in this field, and so they don't cover a lot of the testing. Some of it they do, and but a lot of it they don't. So it would be a cash outlay from the patient, and then also, especially with the hormonal treatments, there's issues that insurance companies don't like to cover the treatments either because they're not going to be a strict pill. So.
And part of the problem also is sometimes people don't fall into the category of an actual diagnosis.
True.
And
very true.
The whole system seems to be based off of diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor has to report a code that says, this person has this diagnosis, and the insurance companies pay off of this diagnosis and can pay for the medicines off of this diagnosis. So somebody may be trending in a direction but not quite meet that criteria.
Exactly.
And hopefully with these tests, we can find some of this out.
Can find it out and help the person reverse that trend so that they don't get their thyroid problem or hypertension or whatever.
All right, great. Well, I'm happy to hear that the medicine in Chanute, Kansas is still trying to keep up with all the changes. I'm sure all the doctors do continuing medical education.
Absolutely.
This is just a unique field that you're interested in.
Yes.
And we appreciate you coming on and talking to us, especially with the hot weather coming on and already on us, about hydration and staying well hydrated. For Channel 5, this is Adrian Madril and Peace of Mind. Thank you for watching our show today.